All right, Chris, welcome to the Micro Collector Podcast. I am super excited to have you on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Justin.
Absolutely. I have to say, man, I think I heard about Clicky Bezel, the store, about a month ago. And since then, I've been to your store twice, and I bought two watches, one each visit. So it's a little dangerous to have your store so close to me, but it's really cool to discover it. And I went to an event the other week there where you launched a couple new brands, and I could just really feel the community coming together around microbrands and independent brands. So really excited to dig in and learn more about how you got to starting Clicky Bezel.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I have some things to share in here too that I've actually never shared publicly, like through videos and all that. So it's going to be a special occasion just for this channel of yours.
Oh, super. I'm super excited for that. But to get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background for those that maybe don't know you? And I'd love to hear how you first got into watches. It's always interesting to hear how folks get into watches. If you have a memory of maybe the first watch that really pulled you down the rabbit hole, it'd be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I'm Chris, and originally I started off as a YouTube channel called Clicky Bezel. Did that for around 4 years, and then decided to open up a brick and mortar right in San Francisco. So that is it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, e- even before the YouTube channel, I know I actually discovered the store first, and then I started checking out some of your content. But yeah, what pulled you into watches in the first place? Have you always been, since a kid, interested in watches, or was there a particular watch that pulled you down the rabbit hole? And then I'd also love to hear that sort of journey to becoming a content creator, because as you mentioned, you were a creator before opening up the storefront. Would love to hear how you go from casual collector and enthusiast to actually creating content.
Yeah, so I've always been around watches. I feel like my dad and my uncle are the ones that I guess piqued my interest in watches. Right, I've always been around it, but I've never partaken in that growing up. As kids, you don't really have money to buy some pieces that they own. But actually, since I am at my parents' house right now, I'm down in SoCal. I grew up in SoCal. I actually have that watch that my dad still wears to this day. Right here, this is actually a tag 1500 series, I believe. When I picture my dad, this is the watch that I picture on his wrist, and forever will be, even though he has tons of other watches in his collection as well. So I guess you could say I've always been an enthusiast, but I didn't partake until college, I guess, when I first got into my first watch. And you're probably gonna laugh at this, but I would actually consider a very serious watch, the Casio calculator watch, right? And Casio is a very interesting brand because they have so many lineups. But the calculator, for some reason, kind of I gravitate towards that. And also, I was trying to complete my costume, which was an '80s inspired, Back to the Future costume, right? So you just need that watch to complete the look on there. So yeah, I've since then I've just always been on YouTube watching the Urban Gentry, Teddy Baldassar, all those guys, and I was like, how do I get involved, working in the industry a little bit. So I was looking around. At the time, I was a professional photographer, not so much video yet, but mostly photographer. But I was dabbling in video at the time as well, and I found a listing online for a videographer, video/video producer at Bob's Watches. And if you're into watches or secondary watches, you'll see a bunch of articles all written on Bob's Watches website. And so I knew them very well. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that they're local here in Newport Beach. And I applied, and they already found their videographer. All right. So the listing was up for whatever reason. They didn't take it down. But I sent over, I guess, like a reel of a Seiko. And I was just like doing some light play on it with camera work and all that. And the hiring manager liked it. So he basically dropped the other guy and said, hey, come in here for an interview, more like a vibe check. And yeah, I got the job. And ever since then, it's just been all about Rolex during that time, Omega, all of these like bigger brands. And it's kind of insane to be in that world, right? So you just see tons of watches coming in at Bob's Watches. So no micro brands, in sight, aside from a few good friends that I'm still friends with. Ripley is another one. I think you met him at the event earlier. So Now he's an editor for Blog to Watch. But yeah, I've met a lot of cool people, saw a lot of cool watches. And then after my 4 years there, I decided to move to San Francisco up north. Actually, sorry, let me circle back because the inception of Clicky Bezel was during my time at Bob's Watches. So let me just circle back a little bit. Clicky Bezel started off as a joke. It was a conversation with me and a few friends at Bob's Watches at work. It was more like a lunch conversation because one thing that we always love doing inside of the photography room is picking up a watch and clicking the bezel. It's always fun to do that, no matter what watch it is. And we were wondering, like, oh, what'd be really funny is if we create a YouTube channel, like an ASMR YouTube channel around watches, right? And at the time, that was like a really big thing, ASMR content. I'm not sure if that's still. I'm sure it's still a thing now, but before it was kind of a big thing. So like, okay, so I came up with a clever name. This was before Chat GPT could help with anything too. Clicky Bezel, and I pushed out 2 videos, literally me whispering into the camera, clicking bezels, playing around with the bracelets, and all these. I'm not sure if the camera can pick this up, but like clasps opening up, and unfortunately, this bezel is broken, so it doesn't click anymore. It's more like a smooth bezel. But it it was a joke. Didn't really take off, but I did get a few comments on there. I think one of them that really stood out was, what the ASMR world is missing? Quality watches for ASMR videos. So that was a highlight of Clicky Bezel of that era, the ASMR era. So I closed that for a little bit, and I never said this publicly, but after that, the pandemic happened. And so what do? We're working from home. We're trying to find, we have extra time. So I'm like, what? I'm going to start making print on demand t-shirts, all geared around watch enthusiasts. So I did, under the Clicky Bezel brand, and it was fun. I got a few sales here and there, nothing crazy. It's more like a hobby, but that quickly died off after like a few months, right? And then for the longest time, I think it was about a year, the Clicky Bezel name has never been out there again in terms of content or making products until the moon swatches came out. And luckily, I was just in the right place at the right time. And my wife was like, you know what? You should start getting back into YouTube again and cover that story. And I think at the time there was only San Francisco and Las Vegas. Those 2 boutiques were the only ones that were selling. You could actually line up to pick up these watches. So we're like, okay, yeah, you know what? Well, why not? Let's just line up at 4 o'clock and see if there's anyone in line. Yeah, there was people in line. I think we were about like ninth in line or so.
Oh, that's pretty good.
But then, yeah, it was pretty good. But the thing is, like after, I think it was like 14 hours or so that we were lining up for, we ended up being 26th in line or something like that. I think what it is, people were bringing in their friends, right? And I'm
Yeah,
like, oh my god,
people holding spaces.
exactly. So I'm like, oh my god, are we gonna get our hands on a watch? You know? And I'm like, I hope we do. I hope there's enough to go around. Um, and I didn't realize how much of a buzz those watches were gonna get, right? So I'm like, all right, well, we'll just film some things with our phone. At the time, we had our electric scooters, so we're kind of like documenting what was going around for B-roll. And then I got into the editing bay and just whipped something up together. And luckily, and I'm sure you know this too, as a creator yourself, your first video, like official video, never does well, right? It's a learning process, and as you get better, you gain traction, then people start watching your videos. Because of the buzz around the mood swatches, and it's not my first rodeo making videos. That's what I was doing at Bob's Watches. It was a perfect storm. Like the first video kind of picked up. I think within a few days, it was 100,000 views and garnered, close to 1,000 subscribers. Yeah, so it was awesome. It was a very, how do I say, like it was a very high moment. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I need to start feeding this now. I need to start feeding this thing called Clicky Bezel, right?
Yeah, totally. And by the way, I was a big fan of the Moonswatch launch. I actually, in a previous life, I say that, but it's, maybe like 10 years ago, I got into collecting vintage Swatch watches. So I was, I think I mentioned to you, I grew up in Hong Kong. There's little markets that you can go to in Hong Kong that have all kind of vintage Swatch watches. I found a couple websites as well. And then the Moon Swatch launch really reactivated my interest in Swatch. And I was struggling in the US to find them because I didn't wait in line. I think I bought my first Moon Swatch on like Chrono 24 or something like that. And then surprisingly, when I went to Hong Kong and I went to the Swatch boutique there, they had all of them, and easily available. You didn't have to wait in line. And, I got, I got like so many of the different ones that I wanted because I didn't know if I'd be able to get them, again, in the US. So I think that
Yeah.
re-energized a lot of collectors and enthusiasts. Very cool to hear about how Clicky Bezel, the YouTube channel, really started taking off. And I've seen some of your content, and I think the quality is really, really, really awesome. I can see your background in photography and videography in there. One in particular that I really enjoyed, and I think I mentioned to you, my son and I watched it, was your trip to Japan, where you were going to all the different markets and checking out the Seikos and finding those collectors, I guess the collector watches that everybody tries to get out there. And now I have Japan on my list to definitely go and check that out. But one question I have for you is, where did the microbrand and independent bug come, right? So as I mentioned, Clicky Bezel, the store, specializes in microbrands and independents. You mentioned your background at Bob's and the YouTube channel, a lot of that focusing on larger brands, the Rolexes, the Swatches of the world. What sort of sparked your interest in microbrands? And do you remember the first microbrand that kind of pulled you down the microbrand rabbit hole?
Yeah, great question. So, during my time at Bob's, I made a lot of friends and they wore a lot of pieces, like pieces that normal people could afford, right? And yeah. So I remember Ripley wearing a Formex. There was even it's not a micro brand, but it's what's that Russian, the Vostoks, right? And I'm like, at the time, I think they were like $50 or $60 on Amazon. I'm like, this can't be good. Like, this can't be good at all. Um, and then what was it? Oh, another friend was wearing a Christopher Ward at the time before the rebrand. So like kind of like the OG Christopher Wards, Spinnakers as well. And I'm like, you can get these for literally like $200, at the time, like these Spinnakers, a few of the Christopher Wards. I think they were getting rid of their before the rebrand. I think it was like less than $500. I'm like, this can't be good. They brought in the watches. I was taking a look at them. I'm like, this feels better than some of my more expensive pieces on my wrist, and this is like a fraction of the cost, right? So I think since then, that's when I kind of looked more into that. And there's a watch group over here, not the Red Bar, it's called OC Chrono, where I saw a lot more on people's wrists too. And I'm like, wow, there's a world outside of like these bigger brands, right? And that kind of like piqued my interest. And then I started digging into it a little bit more. And, one of my favorite brands right now at the moment is Chrono Tokyo. I don't have it on with me right now, but I think that just the allure of that, the aesthetic, the story behind it, the maker Hajime Asoka, like that aspect really piqued my interest on that. So I dug a little bit more into the microbrand space since then.
Yeah, I think I mentioned to you that my gateway was Brew. And then very soon after that, I started learning about all the different brands. Formex and Christopher Ward were definitely two early ones that I discovered. The first one I bought at your store was Kuoe, and that's kind of opened up the rabbit hole for Japanese microbrands now. And Corona Tokyo is on my list. I saw some content that you created on it as well. That's a whole world to get into as well. But very cool to hear about that initial spark. How about, in terms of the storefront? So now you've learned about microbrands, you start collecting a couple microbrands. What made you realize that there was an opportunity to open up a physical storefront, and what motivated you to take that leap, right? Because that's a big step, right? From, going from a content creator that reviews watches and tells stories about watches to starting to collect microbrands and now saying, you know what, I'm going to, especially in a city like San Francisco, right? I'm going to get some real estate, right? I'm going to get a storefront, and in Union Square, right? In I would say the hottest spot, right? Where you've got Omega, you've got Rolex, you got all those stores around you. What made you realize that was a real opportunity there for this?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, like it was never intended for me, or it's because it's a partnership between me and my wife, like this whole junction, to open up a store. well, for watches, right? The original intention was actually to look for a space for my wife's business, which she's in the bridal industry. And so we were looking around for places, and this would be our first brick and mortar that we're opening up. So we needed a little bit of pull from something. My wife's brand has only been around at the time for about two years, so very, very new. Versus Clicky Bezel, if you date back, it's been around for about 4 years, right? During that time, so we're like, you know what? Let's split up the shop a little bit, and we'll have 80% bridal, and then we'll have 20% watches. And the idea of it was to motivate, the groom or the groom's men to look at pieces while the bridals are getting serviced, right? So we're like, ooh, this will be a good idea. And also we can present that to our landlord, right? Because they have to like trust us. They build the trust. So I said, okay, well, Clicky Bezel has been around for this long. It started off on YouTube. It amassed X many views at the time and this many subscribers. And he bought it. If without Clicky Bezel, that store would not exist with my wife, right? And we soon realized that people started coming in more for the watches. So instead of the store being 20%, it ended up being 30% more, 50% more. And then now it's a full-fledged watch shop at this point. But to give you some context, the original brands that we were supposed to be opening up with during the partnership, Bridal Boutique and Clicky Bezel, was actually Kuoe, Nivada, Grenchen, and Baltic. That's it. Like that was it. And and a selection of straps too from Deluxe. Just so we can like mix and matching it with your leathers, right? For the grooms and all that. However, like I said, people started coming up for more watches, and we slowly took off all the wedding dresses on the racks, got rid of the racks, and then now everything is just watches. Right now we're at, I think, 12 brands now. And it's only been, at the time of this recording, less than a year. So it's about 10 months we've been in operation now. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea, by the way. It's interesting to hear that the watches really took off, but I think that idea of combining the watches with the bridal shopping is really, really interesting. I'm thinking back to when I got married, and then it would have been dangerous. Actually, I don't think my wife took me though shopping with her. I think she wanted to be a surprise, but like if I did go with her, man, I would be very excited to go to places, bridal stores that had, watches available there. That would have been really cool. What were some of the early challenges, or I guess early learnings that you had? I guess you did come from Bob's, right? So you had some, you were the photographer, but you had some exposure to retail. But were there some key learnings or challenges that you experienced as a first-time owner, let's say, of a brick and mortar store?
Yeah, great question. So I'll circle back to our grand opening of Clicky Bezel, which was the Saturday of the Wind Up Watch Fair in SF. So we rejiggered the store around so that it looks like it's a watch store, right? But it's still shared with the bridal boutique. And I think we had over 100 RSVPs at the time, and everyone was very excited that there's going to be a Microbrand watch store. And I was a little freaked out because I'm like, okay, we don't have enough watches to be quote unquote be a watch store, right? So I was like, all right, well, we're just gonna see what happens, right? So people were looking at watches and all that, and then it was people responded very well to it, and it was the day after on Sunday when our first official day of business, where we're just like, okay, now what? Like, what do we do now? Like, no one's coming. And I think the biggest challenge that we figured out was inventory. Was like just keeping up with inventory. We noticed very soon, the more watches we have on display for people to look at, the better results we're going to have. Like people are just going to come in and flock in from there. And I would say even now, speaking about the watch store, inventory is still a really big thing, but on a different scale, like from before. Now, because we have 12 brands, we have to keep up with inventory for the rest, right? Of course, our two largest brands right now is Kuoe and Baltic. Formex is very, very much kind of creeping up in there because of a recent video with Kevin O'Leary and Teddy Baldassar. But I would say keeping up with inventory is probably the hardest thing. But the most important thing, in my opinion, which I think we're okay with, but I feel like we can do better, is customer service. So the whole reason why I even thought about a watch part of the store, and then kind of like the philosophy behind it now, is kind of like shopping watches in Japan. Like the service is very, very high. It's just normal for it to be at a very high level versus over here. It's unfortunately, it's not like the top priority for a lot of stores here in the city, let alone the rest of the the nation. But for me, that's the most important thing. Like when people come in here, I don't want people to feel like they're being sold something. I'd rather guide them to something that they want to see, or to the right purchase. Like if it's a first time buyer, or a watch enthusiast like yourself, right? So yeah,
That makes a lot of sense. And I think actually, um, the timing is right for something like this for a couple different reasons. One is the microbrand space is really taking off. It's gaining popularity, and a lot of these brands are direct to consumer. So as an enthusiast, you're kind of, especially like somebody that's not buying, Rolexes or doesn't have experience buying Rolexes at that price point, where even, $1,000 watch, right, is a big purchase, right, for you. To buy it online without trying it on and, feeling it, looking at it, seeing it on your wrist is a leap of faith. And having a storefront where you can actually try some of these watches on, I think is really, really great. On the other side of the coin, there's the whole Rolex thing that's going on, right? Where, the boutiques, you can't even buy the watches, and they're, in some ways they're treating customers very, very poorly, right? To have a much more welcoming environment where you can come in, you can try everything on, you can buy it, and you can also speak to folks like yourself that are really well versed in the space and can help guide you. But also, what I've experienced in your store is other people that are enthusiasts that are there, that, conversations happening. It's almost like a place to congregate with other enthusiasts and like enjoy the practice of collecting and being an enthusiast. So it's an experience in and of itself. And I think, again, the microbrand trend, as well as all that stuff that's going on with Rolexes and high-end boutiques that make it feel, I guess, a little unwelcoming, creates
right,
kind of the
right.
perfect recipe for something like Clicky Bezel.
Yeah, like the main thing too is I want people to feel very comfortable when they come in, and I just want it to be very approachable for a lot of enthusiasts, or not even enthusiasts, like first time buyers too. I've noticed when they are first time buyers that come into the store, they're very nervous. I'd be nervous too. Like I'm not sure what I get myself into. Like all the watches are out, so I can like touch them. It's kind of a weird concept for people, right? Especially first time buyers. But for those that get it, I can see in their eyes that they're freaked out. They're like, "Oh my goodness, Baltic, Kuoe, Formex, like all these like brands that they've only seen in person, like, or sorry, online, like you said, right? And then getting to handle them in person for the first time if they're not at a watch fair, right? Or like a watch event of some sort. So I think that's like the biggest part about Clicky Bezel is the hands-on experience.
Absolutely. You mentioned Kuo and Baltic being sort of some of the most popular, and then Formex also. Are there some other brands that you have in your store that have surprised you in terms of the level of popularity, or, even ones maybe that you don't have in the store yet that you're hoping to get soon because people are coming to the store saying, "Hey, do you guys have any of these?" I'm curious if there are sort of like ones on your radar, either again in store or out of store, that you think are really growing in popularity.
Yeah, I would say the ones that are really surprising me well, before, not now, not so much, but is Nivada, Grenchen, and Vulcain. Just because those ones are very much heritage brands, right? They're not. It's weird to call them microbrands, but they are in the microbrand space, like the ether. But I think those ones, just because they lean a lot more vintage, right? They're just taken off from their old catalogs and essentially like reissuing those. Some of them in a more modern way with larger case diameters and all that. Some of them very traditional, like Vulcain, where it's coming in at close to 36 millimeters. Some brand. So you're saying that like what brands are we going to be bringing in that we're excited about? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, either ones that you have in store that have surprised you, and I think that's, you mentioned Nevada Granchen and Vulcane in that sense, and those are two that actually I didn't know so much about the history, and I started digging into it, and that excites me as well, right? That there's a little bit of history here, and that's kind of like rejuvenating the brand. But yeah, maybe that's an interesting angle as well. Some that you don't have in store that maybe are coming soon that you're really excited about because people have been asking about them.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of people talking about Japanese brands, right? So brands like Corona Tokyo, which unfortunately, due to their limited nature, they're very, very limited, right? They're very elusive pieces. I think the last release, which I was lucky to, have an allocation for, the Inseki, the one with the meteorite dial, that one sold out within 30 seconds, and a lot of people were really angry about that. Same thing for Studio Underdog, right? Like we can't, it doesn't really work out for their model. However, there are some brands that we've noticed we've been hearing all the time. One of which is Echo Neutra, and I'm not sure when you're going to be releasing this video, but we're pleased to announce that we're going to be working with them very soon in May. So in time for the Wind Up Watch Fair. So that's going to be the newest brand that we'll be bringing in. And also this other Japanese brand. I think I mentioned it to you as well. Kiwame, not to be confused with Kurono, Nis, and all the other Japanese brands that start with a K, but Kiwame, they only have one model that's actually available to public. The first model that they released, they're no longer producing. But give that a shot. Give that a look. Kiwame. I think they're pretty great. Kind of upcoming brand. Kind of like how Kuoe was in their start.
Yeah, I actually read an article about them maybe a couple weeks ago, and they're on my list. Chrono Tokyo as well. I think I'm going to have to go to Tokyo to have maybe a chance of getting that. And Econutra has definitely been on my list. I've followed that brand for some time, and the Ribbonera, oh my gosh, it's like they've almost like reinvented themselves, even though they're relatively new with that model, and just kind of are even more popular than they were before that. So, yeah, I'm definitely, eager for you to get those in store. As I actually saw somebody that was at your party the other day who had one on the wrist, and that was the first time that I'd seen it in person. And yeah, it just made me even more excited to get one as well.
Yeah, what it is about the Ribbon era too that we're excited about is we want to get more ladies into watches as well. So Beaubleu was a brand that we recently introduced, right? And watches like the Eche Figura, which is that rectangular case, kind of similar to a Cartier, right? I think that would appeal to a lot of ladies. Same thing with the Rivenera. They make a smaller version called the Rivenera Piccolo, and it's a little bit more squarish in nature rather than rectangular. I think those ones we're going to kind of push towards ladies a little bit more because we've noticed kind of an influx in females coming through too for a watch.
Yeah, I think that's a huge missed opportunity in the space in general, which is just like a huge skew towards men's watches. And I know that, a lot of watches are also considered unisex, but, um, you know, creating some watches that are either specifically geared towards women or, again, you know, sized in a way that they can appeal, and shaped in a way that they can appeal to women as well. And I think that one is a great example. So that's great to hear, some exciting new brands coming into the store. I think you had some other announcements coming soon, particularly around the vintage space that I'm really interested in. And I think I had mentioned to you, I've always been interested in getting some vintage watches in my collection and scared to do so because I don't know, what to look for. And again, buying them online is really scary. So I think similar to Microbrands, having a storefront where you can speak to somebody that's knowledgeable, that you trust, that you can trust that it's high quality and it's been sort of vetted ahead of time, but also that you can just speak to sort of guide you is a really interesting, I think, value prop. So tell us a little bit about that. What watches are you going to start bringing into the store from a vintage perspective?
Yeah, so the beginning of February, we actually sourced some watches from Japan. We work with a couple of dealers out there, trusted dealers as well, so we make sure everything is working and timed correctly as well. And we just got a few pieces. I think it was about 6 pieces we introduced earlier in February for the event because we didn't think it would be moving so fast. But I think it was the first couple weeks we were sold out of the vintage pieces, and I'm like, okay, well, clearly there's a demand for these, older pieces, and I think it has partly to do because of the selection of watches too. For the first collection, I wanted to focus more on Japanese, Grand Seikos, King Seikos, and there was one Lord Marvel inside there too. That has just this beautiful, immaculate dial, which I'll never see again because that was the first time I've ever seen it. It was the cleanest version of it. That's the problem with vintage is, once it's gone, it's basically gone forever, unless, you wait another few years for it to pop up on the ether, right? But I think right now we want to focus on the vintage Japanese watches in the golden era, right? In the 60s and 70s for them. Um, mostly with Seikos. I think there's just so many variations of really weird Seikos out there, like the Vinax, like with their angler cut glasses and all that. Very interesting stuff. It's more than just Pogues and, old divers from Seiko that you would kind of think of when you think of vintage Seiko.
Yeah, I think that's a really great place to start with vintage and a really accessible place. So I have a feeling I'm going to be picking up some. I feel like, yeah, I was thinking back to your launch or your party that you had the other day. And I remember you saying, 3 new brands and a line of vintage. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll get a vintage watch. And then I saw your message that they were all sold out. So I was like, okay, next time. But I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear that you're expanding. And I also think I saw a sneak peek of a video coming out soon.
Yes. Yes. I just released a trailer and the video is actually going to be out in 20 minutes. So at 6 p.m. So stay tuned for that one. But yeah, if we're circling back to the Japanese video, I knew Eric Wynn since working at Bob's Watches. They kind of had a thing together, and because Eric Wynn, if you don't know him, he is the vintage watch guy, right? He's the most knowledgeable person that I know, and I think everyone can agree that he knows everything there is to know about vintage Rolex and vintage watches in general. So actually, I have a piece here that was it was a gift from Eric Wind. It was my wife mostly wears it just because she likes it a lot. But this one is a vintage cricket from 1952. So it's a prized possession of ours. And yeah, my dream right now is to actually work with Eric Wind on like an Eric Wind curated collection of pieces. Things that are kind of like in the attainable region, right? I would say like sub 10K value pieces versus, his over 6-figure pieces that he usually deals. That's his bread and butter, right? So I think that would be pretty cool.
Very cool. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of exciting stuff to come to Clicky Bezel, new brands, vintage line, maybe a collaboration with Eric Wind. If folks are listening to this, especially those based in the Bay Area, and they want to follow along, they want to stay up to date with what's going on at Clicky Bezel, where's the best place for folks to go and follow along and even engage with you?
Yeah, so actually we've been posting a lot more on TikTok. That's a kind of like a platform we haven't explored ever since until we started opening up the store. I feel like a lot of people found us through there. But also YouTube. That's the inception of the Clicky Bezel brand, right? And also Instagram too. So if you're looking for events, if you want to know more about our events, definitely check out Clicky Bezel on Instagram, or you can follow our newsletter at clickybezel.com.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for taking the time, stopping by today and sharing your journey. I'm super excited. As somebody that's based in the Bay Area, I know I get to jump over the bridge and visit you and see all these cool new watches that are coming to your store. But if anybody's listening and ever in San Francisco, Clicky Bezel is a awesome store to go to, and follow Chris online. He's got some great content out there as well. But really appreciate you taking the time, and have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Justin.